30 years ago, Al and Terry Purvis left for Thailand in simple obedience to the Great Commission. Suddenly challenged by the reality of the mission field, would they back down from what they believed God had called them to do? Or would they face the giants that have stood against missionaries in Asia for 5 centuries? A history of missions appeared to have a minimal effect against the vast cultural strongholds of the Buddhist nation. Al and Terry's response was to start a family that would establish successive generations of Christian faith in a nation where second-generation believers were almost non-existent. In order to ensure success, Al and Terry would need to plant a stake, a physical connection to the nation. Owning land and buildings would tie this ministry to the nation and establish the vision for generations to come. They stood on the precipice of their Great Commission destiny with this clear and simple dream. How would the young Purvis family succeed in driving their stake in a nation like Thailand? Missionaries first set foot on Thailand soil as early as the 1550s. The Portuguese and the French brought chaplains along with their mercenaries, arriving first in the north and eventually setting up Catholic institutions in the new capital of Bangkok. Protestant missionaries arrived in 1848, Finney revivalists with a vision to usher in God's kingdom to the Buddhist nation. After a brief period of evangelistic success, the newly formed church in Thailand underwent a time of intense persecution. 2 documented reports and several undocumented ones show converts being murdered for their faith in Christ. After 20 years, persecution was abated by the etiquette of religious toleration, but congregations continued to experience sporadic numbers. Missionaries began instead to concentrate on building medical and educational facilities, which since World War II have slowly been handed over to the Thai companies and turned into private institutions. Today, most Catholic schools, although some of the best private institutions in the country, have little Christian witness, as Buddhist teachers are hired to teach this still foreign religion to the students.
Our purpose really as pioneers is to break the way open, not just in the sense of a spiritual breakthrough, but actually break things open in the spirit and in the natural so that other people can follow in the footsteps so that the momentum and the ministry can grow. Leaders, we can increase in leaders. We can produce another generation of people that build on what we've built. And so it really has to do with being able to break through and open up in new areas.
Missionaries are not just called to build hospitals and schools, although those things have contributed significantly to the growth of Christianity in many nations. The most successful social works are based in strong local churches and remain connected to local churches. The biblical task of missionaries is to break ground for the gospel to advance. Missionaries coming into a place like Thailand or any country in Southeast Asia come face to face with a strong anti-Christian worldview. False religions hold people in fear, poverty, and are bound for hell while blinding them from the God who wants to set them free. The missionary, therefore, must come in with that radical message. the one message that will change the entire socioeconomic and religious makeup of a nation. This is no easy task because demonic forces are assigned to directly oppose anything Christians try to do. Missionaries have been given an immense challenge. While some in Thailand and across Asia have risen to the challenge, many others have given up on the spiritual vision and defaulted to social embetterment of the nation. Some have fallen into adultery. Some just quit and went home. Al and Terry Purvis stand among those pioneering the way for the gospel in the truest sense, plowing spiritual ground in Thailand that has yet been unturned. In order for the gospel to really take root in any nation, we must plant a spiritual stake, one that declares we are here to stay, immovable, committed to the end, to lay a foundation that the next generation of Christians will build upon. The Lighthouse building would become the stake of the mission's endeavor, a base of ministry, a home for El Shaddai children, a safe place for new missionaries and Bible school students to live, a place from which to send apostles into the nations of Asia. When Al and Terry arrived in Asia, they had an apostolic vision burning in their hearts. Success of this vision would depend on planting a solid foundation. A concrete strategy was beginning to take shape, yet they could not have imagined the devastation that lay in wait.
You remember, honey, when we first came to Thailand, how we met discouraging words from so many people, and we looked for fellowship and looked to connect with other missionaries, but we found them really not very positive, and even telling us things like, well, whatever it is you plan to come to do, you're not going to be able to do it. That can't be done here. I think it was a barrage of negativity in those days, and it's amazing because a lot of people were doing some wonderful things, but it was this attitude where if this doesn't work, we're going home. People warned us to be ready for the closed doors and so on, and I found that very hard to deal with, hard to handle.
I found that really hard. God bless them, when we used to try to have fellowship with other missionaries, I remember us coming back from the meetings being pretty depressed.
Yeah, it's true.
And we had to get into the Word, say, God, what do you say about this situation?
I think that so many people had suffered so many disappointments. One of the things that we found when we came was the attitude in the West that you would send a missionary to a nation like Thailand and expect that missionary to win the nation and come back and report, 3 months later.
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe give him a year, and all the wonderful things that God had done. And I think when people got here to the mission field and they discovered that that wasn't the case, you could plug away for years and not see much of a result. And I think that kind of despondency, hopelessness, disappointment, really, even regret sometimes, set into the hearts of so many missionaries. And I think even that's probably why many of them were open to failure, even moral failure, and falling into sin and those kind of things. And there was a real spirit of defeat on the missionaries and on the vision. And that's really one of the things that God sent us here to break that. If you're going to break through in a nation, you have got to plant yourself there and say that we're not moving until we accomplish what God sent us to do.
It's like having an attitude, I'm here to stay.
That's it.
Al and Terry began the ministry by gathering unwanted children that would become a new generation of leaders. But in the shadows of so many failed mission visions, a breakthrough in Thailand would require some very radical and unorthodox moves.
But when we looked at what needed to be done, it was like there were so many things telling us, you guys can't stay here, you're not citizens of this country, you don't belong here, you're foreigners, all of that kind of stuff, and it's coming against you all the time. And I just really felt that we need to plant a physical stake in the nation. There's something about owning land and building a building that says, we're here. And it changes the attitudes of the people that you're trying to deal with. It changes the attitudes of the people that you're trying to train and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the issues. I mean, you remember, honey, when we would go back to Canada, we would come back every time and our kids would say, we thought you weren't coming back. And we had to come back and tell the kids, no, we are back. We're committed here for life. This is our life. And but it was unbelievable to most people. And even, you know, a lot of guys had seen the different comings and goings and really felt that we would never stick it out. We would never stay.
I think the opportunity of really planting strong came was when we first had a couple come in, and it just didn't work, watching these hirelings be the parents of the kids, and we knew that we had to make a decision that we should be the parents. If we're going to really embed something into the lives of these kids, we had to guide them. And I think that moment when we asked the children to decide, do you want us to be your parents, or should we look for somebody else that's of your nationality to be your parents? And when they said we wanted you to be parents, something happened on the inside of us too, and it knitted us together as a family.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true.
And then we knew for sure that we were there to stay.
And so again, we needed to plant that stake of a physical stake of land and building where we could move into and say, no, this is the El Shaddai family home, and we are here to stay, and we are going to see a next generation, a new generation of second generation believers raised up who can really make an impact in this nation.
Al Purvis met his national counterpart, a well-known leader serving as the chairman of a Bible college in Bangkok. A year later, the two men established a new Thai Christian organization that would provide the covering and administration for the things that Al carried in his heart. As these strategic elements had come into place, Al and Terry believed the time had come for them to buy some land and build a ministry home for their growing family and future ministry.
With this idea of planting a stake in our hearts, we began to look at land in Bangkok and think, you know, that's really the way to go.
The plans. Let's just look at the, well, this is kind of the layout of our property here. We have what you call one rai, and that's between 1/4 and 1/3 of an acre. Okay, and our building first will be built along that far side there. Okay, just as we see it laid out here. And it'll be a 4-story building housing our offices on the bottom, and kitchen, cooking, laundry facilities for the orphanages, which will be on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And the 4th floor will be developed for meeting room and video and video studio and so on.
Through a miracle that God did, absolutely amazing financial miracle, we had some money in Canada, but it wasn't enough to pay for the land, and we put a down payment on this piece of land, and we needed to pay for it this month and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden they turned the baht loose from the dollar. It was tied to the US dollar before, and our money increased, was it 17% or something overnight?
$5,000.
Yeah, it was enough anyway to buy this land and pay cash for it. And so that was a real miracle. And then we started into this building project.
The building project began with excitement, but eventually ground to an unfinished halt. The lack of funds confused the young missionaries. Had supporters just lost interest? Was the project just too big? Or was there something even bigger looming behind the scenes? The building project would never recover, and years later, Al and Terry discovered that their Thai chairman had been taking contractor paybacks and siphoning money from the building project. The Thai organization went in the way of corruption, along with the untrustworthy chairman.
The amount of attack that comes against something like that, to keep you from having something like that, to me it was just amazing. I couldn't believe that so many things would try to go wrong. And that building, we got it built up to, I don't know what, the 3rd floor or something, and it's posts and pillars and steel and concrete up there, and then the money just dried up. There was no more funds to build it with. Even promises that we had were broken, and you know, commitments fallen through and that kind of thing. And so eventually the building permit expired on the building. The building wasn't finished, and there we sat, you know, what are we going to do with it now? One of the things that I decided before we went into that building project, and we had talked about this, is that we are not going to pin our success or our pride or anything on this building. In other words, if it goes or fails or takes a long time or a short time, we will not be embarrassed about it. This is God's thing. We totally give it to Him. And so we went into it with that idea, and somebody might say, well, maybe that's why you couldn't finish it, but it's not. The thing is, we have to go at it with that attitude that this is, my life does not depend on this building, my life depends on God. And so when the building faltered like that, I'm just saying, okay, what's next? And of course now we look back years later and we see that